Welcome back to Feed the Dark podcast. Thank you as always
Feed
for
the
tuning
dark.
in. Feed the Dark. Now,
Feed the dark.
this episode is very special to me because I have my friend Ciano on here, who I've known for about 16 years almost. I'd
Hey,
say.
beautiful people. Let's go. Yeah. We're
We
quarter
go.
of a full century. That's how many.
Yes.
That's how long 16 years is.
Yeah,
It's
we
a
are
century.
old. We are old.
A century of knowledge. Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But I mean, I'm super excited to talk to you, obviously, because you're one of my best friends, but also because you write in the horror genre, which is really, really interesting. You're actually the first person I had on here, or who I'm having on here, who is, well, I might have had other horror writers on, but you're the first person on who we're going to really delve into your own work, which is really
Oh, well, thank you. I'm flattered and honored to be on this. And I'm pretty hyped. Let's do it. Let's feed the dark.
Let's feed it, man. Actually, before we get into it, just because of the whole not everyone watches a whole episode's kind of statistics, would you like to plug anywhere that people could find you just in the beginning? Just so
sure, absolutely.
Right away. Cool.
Absolutely. You can find me. My brand is pretty uniform. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AmazingJCiano. Website is AmazingJCiano.com. Feel free to check those out for some horror content. I have a webcomic that I do, Tales of Happenstance, that is fully online. There's a demo, 4-page demo of Black Woods that's up there as well. And just feel free to message me for any embarrassing Evan stories that you might want to know.
We're editing out your email now.
I'm here for that. Okay.
But this first part,
and that's the podcast. Thank you so much for
oh my god, I can't wait for all my responses. But no, actually, a main reason I also wanted to talk to you is because I actually, even though I've known you that long, I had no idea you were really into horror. Like, I mean, I've obviously had the horror merch all the time. I played horror movies at parties, but you,
every party.
Every party I would play like Evil Dead 2
party.
Oh yeah, man, or Nightmare on Elm Street or something. But yeah, man, but I didn't really know you were super into the genre, so I kind of and now you write in it, so I kind of wanted to get your backstory with that and your experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So whatchamacallit? So probably didn't really get into horror until probably around high school. I'm an avid comic reader, as you know. So as in high school, I started to branch out more, than the usual stuff I was reading. And one of the characters who really attracted me was Marvel's Man-Thing, who is a swamp monster. And he has a swamp monster, type of comic where it's a small town, but really kind of horrific things happen there. And the Man-Thing is both the monster and the vehicle for the stories, where we follow him and he encounters things where he's not necessarily the monster, but the people around him are. And it's really, really neat. And that kind of blew me away and really kind of opened the door for me getting into not just, horror comics, but horror as a genre.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get into that more, actually, because on reading one of your newer comics, I definitely see a lot of influence from Man-Thing in that. And I can't believe I didn't see that immediately. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. But was it just comics that got you into it, or was it film as well, or books, or was it mostly just the
mostly just comics, actually? Like,
cool.
much more. Like I appreciate horror movies, but I wouldn't call myself like a horror movie buff. It's not a genre I mostly go out of the way to view. But like when I stumble into them, like I'll watch a movie through you, or shows I like, I'll do like a horror take. Riverdale, which is like the CW show. They do a Halloween episode every year, which leans heavily on horror. They have like a lot of very good horror plots. In some ways, they actually do horror better than Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is supposed to be their horror show.
I saw like I guess I did Dracula in one episode only because I was looking at like a top 10 Dracula list, and one from Riverdale was in that. I've never seen Riverdale, but yeah,
it's a trip.
I should check that out at some point. Yeah, yeah, I hear it's pretty crazy. But yeah. So since your only real experiences from comics, I mean, what about horror really drew you to it? Was it? I mean, from reading your stuff, it's not really the gore stuff. Is it more psychological or because
Oh, I
talking about?
love the psychology of horror comics.
Mm,
Whatchamacallit, like gore's nice, but like you can get gore, I feel like almost in any genre at this point.
yeah, like action or whatever. Like
Action, medieval fantasy,
yeah.
romance, the gore's there.
Mm. Yeah, no, because I interviewed my mom and dad before this, and my mom has no idea why anyone would like horror, and my dad has no idea why anyone would like gory stuff, but he loves
Yeah,
psychological stuff like Silence of a Lamb. So it's pretty interesting to get perspective of someone who only has it from one medium,
yeah.
but is loves it so much that they write about it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, like I was always really drawn to the like I said, the psychology of it. But not just that, but like especially in horror comics, you get a lot of really great narration. And that's such a, I think, an instrumental tool in setting a tone. Because comics, they lack music cues, they lack jump cuts. It's hard to get a jump scare in a comic book. But you can absolutely creep people out with the right narration and the right visual framing.
Oh yeah, no, it's a
Yeah,
very different medium, and like I know a lot of people who are book lovers usually say like, oh, the book is always better than the movie. That's kind of a general meme that goes around. I actually disagree. I like some movies more than the books. I'm told I'll like Silence of a Lambs more, and I mean just in general like Clockwork Orange and Fight Club, I actually
yeah.
prefer the film. So yeah, I think different mediums can do different things. So with that, I guess we should get a little bit into the stories that you write. Would you like to
Oh,
start with
absolutely.
yeah? So I
Let's do Blackwoods first.
okay.
So that's like my more pure horror comic. So Blackwoods is it's going to be a 6-issue series. We're exploring different things with it right now. But essentially, that's a book I do with artist and co-creator Josh Hickson. Josh is supremely talented. He did Shanghai Red for Image Comics. He's doing the plot right now, which is another horror comic for Vault Comics. The first trade of that just came out. Feel free to order it. Shanghai Red, also available in trade paperback. But whatchamacallit, he's the artist, and he does a phenomenal job. And the premise of that book is a bullied boy named Quinn. Actually, he's a tormented kind of a bullied kid. His bully's dating, the girl of his dreams, and he wants to change his life. And he stumbles upon a lost book of magic in the Blackwoods, which are on the perimeter of the town that they live in. And he wants to use that book to kind of take revenge. And he uses the magic and has really unintended consequences. And he winds up dragging him and his high school crush down this rabbit hole of secrets and dark magic that is the Blackwoods.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a very very concise summary. I mean, for so much here that I want to get into, I don't even know where to begin. I guess first, I guess we should talk about the artwork. Um, I guess can you explain a little bit what it's like to work with an artist because I feel like that added so much to your vision. And then
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, at certain points, I'll do the scripting, and then Josh will come back with me with like, okay, like what if we do it this way, and I'm like, yes, we should absolutely do it that way.
yeah,
So
no,
like
yeah,
it's really it's kind of a collaboration that we're both kind of like bouncing ideas off each other a little bit. Um, as
yeah.
far
I
as
mean,
like
you're
how to do scenes and how to like convey stuff on the page. But Josh is really talented. I'll usually, if there's certain scenes I want, I'll give him I'll be like, this is how I'm picturing this. But he almost always has the freedom to kind of do it the way that he thinks will work best visually.
yeah. I was actually going to ask you about that because you guys seem so in sync, which I guess is
Yeah.
the key to any effective comic. But I mean, there's the way that he draws like the twisted trees and everything, and the design that was very obviously inspired by Man Thing. Now that I think about it, but it's so different that it's you don't really think about it immediately if you don't know to think to to actually direct your brain there. But I mean, just all the creature designs are so. I mean, I don't even know the right word for them. They're disgusting, but they're also like kind of beautiful. I mean, because it's a weird balance. But I mean, he also works so well with just you know, as I was saying before, just your voice and how you organize the comic is just so interesting. All right, so before we get a little bit more into Josh and his process there, I guess even though you talked a little bit about how you work together, can you explain how you organize the writing and the planning for something like this where you don't even have the visuals yet, but you still have to arrange the story in that way?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So, and it's funny though, because like Josh is, and we'll get into this more with Josh, but Josh is, the way Josh does stuff has almost like affected the way that I script now, where now we're on some of the later issues, I start scripting in a way that is more conducive to what I think Josh's style is.
Mm.
But when I do this, you have the idea in your mind for like what each panel is going to be. And you try and deliberately set up what you think is going to look most visually interesting on the page. And a few neat things that I've kind of stumbled upon that I've kind of thought were brilliant was as much as you can try and make every page a cliffhanger,
Yeah.
where there's always that incentive to kind of turn the page. Even in like a larger story, try and give every issue a purpose. A comic should never feel directionless as far as like a single issue. You should always kind of be building, as best you can towards the greater narrative of the story. And I think this is very important for horror, comics in general. But the reveal of the page turn, I think, is crucial. Because it's not, in all genres for comics, but I feel like especially in horror, because you're constantly trying to build tension, trying to build suspense. And I feel like to have, if you've read a book, you open it and there's like, one page here, one page here.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you read it like this, you can always, even if you don't want to, you always see what is on the page to the right when it's, open.
Oh yeah,
like
no,
that.
the process is, I mean, it's
So
also a visual medium in that way as well. So yeah.
exactly, but like you don't want to spoil, like you don't want to spoil reveal by having it on like the adjacent, on like the page next to it. You want it on the back page. So when
Mm-hmm.
that reader gets to that point and they're building that tension, you can save that reveal for the page turn. And I think some of the stuff we do in Blackwood so well is that we kind of utilize the page turn reveal pretty well, as far as
Yeah,
keeping
no,
the reader in suspense and like keeping reveals and not having it be spoiled a page early.
no, I totally, I mean, I think you masterfully accomplished that. And I know I'm your friend, and I know everyone now knows that I've known you for like, a good amount of years, but no, I wouldn't have had you on if I wasn't like incredibly impressed with your writing here. Cause I don't think I've read anything that you've written since, I guess we were like
probably
18 or
probably
19 years
college.
old. Yeah, probably like early college, I
Yeah.
think. So, I mean, you were good then, but I mean, now I think you're really, you've grown into such a fantastic writer. And I read horror constantly, especially for the show. And there's a lot of stuff I don't like. And it's really, it's awesome to have a friend who I'm not giving a bad review to. So it's pretty awesome. So yeah.
I was always going to come on this. You're going to tell me I was trash and like I'm disrespecting horror and like
That was my original
it.
plan. My original plan was to not read it and just to like call you out.
You had to throw the outline out the window.
Yeah,
Like, damn it, it's good. Oh.
Well, that's why I had you say your email in the beginning. This way I could have like direct everyone hate mail to you once they.
I didn't give my email anywhere. I gave my Twitter and Instagram.
Ah, damn it! I was foiled again. But so let's go back to Josh. I guess before we get into how Josh's work kind of works with your voice, tell us about your history with him and your history, I guess, with artists in general.
Oh, absolutely. So Josh and I have a really great secret origin, so to speak. Back in 2015, I was doing Tales of Happenstance with the Sly Crappa, which is the other comic I do. And I was kind of, I was looking to do more of a pure, straight horror book. And I had this idea in my head that eventually kind of, would become the Blackwoods. And I was looking for an artist. I'd been going to conventions, kind of talent scouting, looking for the right fit because, comics being, it is a visual medium. Like, like there are artists that can do every book, but not every artist should do every book. Art style for a book is so crucial in my eyes, as far as not just for horror comics, but comics in general. Like it really has to be like a great match.
Absolutely.
Like,
that's like Garth Ennis.
And that's what you do. Like, and part of that is, you almost,
yeah,
you almost have to like art direct a little bit as far as, how do you picture this book looking? So I'd been looking for a while. And we were in Escape Pod Comics, which is located in Huntington Village, which is one of the most fantastic comic shops I've ever been in.
It's awesome. I mean, I still miss Collector's Kingdom, but that shop is great.
Yeah. Oh God, I miss Collector's Kingdom. I miss Collector's Kingdom too.
But yeah.
Yeah. But Escape Pod is a phenomenal, phenomenal shop. And I was in there, and Josh was in there, and Josh at the time was working on Shanghai Red. But he was still looking for for other work to go along with that. And I overheard him talking, and I introduced myself, and I was just like, oh, I'm looking for I write, I'm looking for an artist for like potential project. We did the business card exchange. And he had a comic that was self-published like I did, so I bought it. I read it, and I thought it was such a really good fit. I kind of loved the dark grittiness of his artwork, and I just thought he was phenomenal. So we wound up, or rather, I wound up emailing him the following weekend. Just introducing myself, like, hey, I'm Joe. We met at Escape Pod Comics. And I asked if he was interested. We emailed back and forth, and then eventually wound up going to a Starbucks, talk about the project. And he did a rough sketch of the monster in Blackwoods, and he just, crushed it out of the park.
It's one of my favorite designs. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I own the page reveal of the monster.
That photo is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you said he helps write a little bit as well. So what's that balance like? Or is that just more so in like a constructing the visual kind of thing? Or is it
much more? It's much more. I mean, we've changed certain scenes based on his suggestion. Where like like I had an idea for in issue 3. I had an idea for one of the scenes. And the scene is like basically the same, but we changed the way that we did it. I'll tell you which scene after, because it's kind of a large spoiler if we.
Yeah, no, we're trying not to spoil this because I really want people to go out and read this thing. It's freaking awesome.
But we changed one of the scenes based on what he thought and what it was a better suggestion for the scene as far as tension. And just visually, I think it wound up being a much better scene based on his his input and his feedback. And that's kind of the beauty of it is, like he enjoys the story. He enjoys drawing the story as much as I kind of enjoy writing it, which is probably the best compliments.
Yeah, no, for art, that's essential. Yeah.
But it's a great feeling. Like, like his input on the book is crucial. And I can't imagine doing this book with anyone else.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I can't imagine it being drawn by anyone else. I mean, it just flows so perfectly. But I guess we should delve a little bit into the themes of this comic. I mean,
absolutely.
I have some of my own ideas, but I mean, they're mostly spoilers. So I'd rather you, I guess, kind of summarize the ideas that you wanted to portray.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like each book kind of covers a different theme, so to speak. But at its core, the Black Woods is really kind of all about the monster within. It's about what it takes for that monster within to come out, and how much humanity is in you, or rather how much humanity is left once that monster does finally emerge. And we try to kind of explore that with all of our characters to a degree. Some right away, some pay off more down the line. But I think that's such a crucial idea of horror, is that like there's a monster within everyone.
Yeah, no, and that, of course.
At any point, like anyone could,
Yeah, no, it's a universal idea, but it's also, you make it very character specific, at least throughout the 3 issues that I've read thus far. So it's it's very interesting. Okay, so the main character really, he's not like the most sympathetic person, and I feel like I could talk about this only because it's a couple pages in. Like he is someone you feel bad for, but you also strike a balance where he's not exactly like, he doesn't make the best decisions. Like he's like almost, he reminds me of like a Peter Parker, but like an asshole, and like a so. But I was still engaged. Like usually when characters are presented and we're like too far in that other direction, especially immediately, and make just terrible decisions. I mean, I feel like you'd have something to talk about that, or some way to express how you managed to make that engaging.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we tried whatchamacallit, to make everyone somewhat tragic in some way, where there's going to be that inherent kind of sympathy, even if you don't necessarily kind of like them. But like, like I spoke to Josh, was like, I don't think we have a real hero in our comic. I
No, you don't.
but
It's
we
awesome.
have but we have like but we have like and we tried to make compelling protagonists that like you would want to see more of,
Hmm.
and you wouldn't mind following for this story. But like I think in a horror story where it's about the monster kind of coming out within people, I don't know if you can really have a hero in a story like that.
No, and
Um,
I think you made a good decision in not having a hero for that type of story. But I guess before we move on from this, was there anything else you wanted to add to Blackwoods? Anything I
uh,
might have missed that wouldn't be spoiler territory?
would be spoiler territory. I say like not probably not too much.
Mhm.
That would delve into spoiler territory. But the books the book's a great time. I enjoy doing it immensely. I've enjoyed working with Josh. One of my favorite things that have kind of come from this book is the personal friendship that I've kind of developed with Josh,
Mm.
where we hang out and we'll talk to each other at shows. And that's one of the things that's been most rewarding for me on this, besides the actual making of the comic.
That's actually a good jumping off point because I was going to ask you about your experience because you've set up a Comic Con before, and I'm sure you've met other writers and
Yeah,
artists
we've
who.
done a whatchamacallit. We've I've been at Eternal Con, Cradle Con.
Oh.
I've been at New York Comic Con the past few years
Mm.
with the book. And it is kind of neat. You do kind of develop like a circle of people
Yeah,
from
yeah.
going to these shows.
So, what is the have you had any interesting other audience experiences or experiences with other horror writers or artists you just talk to? Because it feels like a pretty well knit community, or at least I would imagine so. I guess I don't, I'm not in that community because I'm not in the comic world, but it seems like there would be some camaraderie there. Have you
Oh,
found that?
100%. Like
Mm.
I've made so many awesome friends through Comic Cons. I know someone else who I met who initially was doing a horror comic. Whatchamacallit, his name is his name is Easton. He just did Samurai Grandpa for Scout Comics. But he when I first met him, he was doing a comic called How, and that book was drop dead gorgeous. But like and it was so funny because the first show we met, I was at Eternal Con in like 2016, and I had Tales of Happenstance, which features a werewolf story, and yet Howl, which was also a werewolf story. So we kind of like I bought his book, and we eventually we wound up like circling to like over each other, and we're like, oh, so you also do a werewolf story? And it was
Yeah, I know I had a similar experience with
that
someone.
was a good icebreaker for us. So, but it was like small world where like the person tabling next to you also has a werewolf story.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I mean,
It
to a
was
lesser
great.
degree, because we didn't do it for careers, but just in college, there was someone who was writing a very similar ghost story that was almost beat by beat, like a kind of similar tale that I was writing. So I feel that respect, but also, camaraderie.
Highlander rule. There can be only
Yeah,
one.
yeah. It's like, oh
Yeah,
man, this is my story, but also yours is so good. So no, that's really cool that you found that. But
yeah.
so yeah, so where do you see the genre going? Actually, no. Before I ask this, I kind of want to ask you about the history in horror in the comic world because I actually don't know too much about this. I know about film
Oh,
and,
for
and
sure.
literature, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So horror comics are actually like massive during the golden age. The golden age, you had a lot
So
more
is this the
genres.
70s or 60s, the golden
The golden
age?
age is like no, golden age is like a the 30s,
Oh, no,
probably the 20s, but like I'm trying
shows
to
how
think
much
of
I
when,
know.
but probably like the 30s till I'm gonna say 1955, 56. Whenever the whatchamacallit, Barry Allen debuts as the Flash, I think is
Ah,
when
right.
the Silver Age technically I think starts. I think that's the marking point. But in the Golden Age, you had a lot more genres that were kind of open. That modern comics I think is finally kind of catching up to.
Hmm.
But back then like romance, like pulp like crime. Superheroes were there, but you had like like dark horror. That's when a like the like I think Tales of the Crypt, or I'm trying to think. There's a very famous horror comic, but I'm blanking on the title name. But like horror was a much larger genre back in like like the 30s and 40s. And then eventually with the book, I think it's Seduction of I watch me just butcher every title of every like landmark thing in comics. But I believe it's Seduction of the Innocent comes out, and it's like blaming crime and like youth disobedience essentially on comics. And like the government kind of cracks down on comics themselves, and you kind of see comics kind of self-regulate. It's kind of really kind of self-regulate themselves, and you see like basically every genre kind of comes to an end. I think except for romance and superheroes. But in the 70s, they actually kind of laxed those regulations, and they allowed vampires. I think vampires weren't outright monsters; they were vampires, or whatever the reason was. But you see the rise of monster comics kind of come back, and you have Morbius the Living Vampire, uh, Tomb of Dracula, which is a Marvel book. The Man Thing comes to an existence. Swamp Thing over at DC Comics. And that genre stays pretty popular for a while. Then I think eventually kind of fades out by the 80s. But then you've kind of had like a more of a modern renaissance now with like horror comics, with things like Afterlife with Archie, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Witches over at Image. So you kind of seen the genre have a little bit of a revival.
No, that's awesome, and that's really great to hear. I mean, other than the dip in the '80s, I feel like for for a lot of that, I feel like cinema has kind of reflected that as well. I mean, obviously, horror was very popular in the '80s, but for the artistic
Yeah.
integrity, I would argue, kind of dipped with nonstop slasher sequels. But yeah, now I feel like the '90s and 2000s film was kind of meh on horror. I mean, it kind of grew up saying like, oh, I mean, I only like old horror films, and all new horror films suck. But now, for the first time ever in the past like maybe 5 to 7 years, I've kind of changed my tune entirely on that, and been like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm alive during this era where there's so many great films that are coming out for a horror fan. I mean, this is literally the first time I've been alive, and in my mid to late 20s. It's awesome. It's really cool. But so you said
But
it was more
we're
like an
peaking right
independent.
now.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah, we're peaking right now in terms of our horror intake.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the
Yeah.
'70s again, even though I wasn't alive during then. But
I know you're rolling. You have your bell bottoms on, like like below
oh yeah,
camera.
yeah, for sure.
That's why you see him from top up, because he's wearing bell bottoms.
But so wait, did you say it was independent comics that kind of brought it back more so, or
Yeah, mostly
okay?
a lot of like the indie scene. And by the indie scene, like things that aren't Marvel or DC comics. Harrow County by Colin Bunn is a very critically acclaimed horror comic of like the last few years. Lock and Key over at IEW.
Oh right, I know that one actually. Yeah.
Whatchamacallit? Why am I blanking on one? But like books like that, that have kind of like revived the genre, a little bit. And I think there's always kind of been an interest in it, but like you've kind of seen the indies and smaller publishers kind of fill the niche, and not necessarily niche, but like do the genres that like the Marvel and DC aren't touching. Marvel and DC have phenomenal horror characters that I love.
Oh, you
That
mentioned
I kind
Morbius
of wish.
before. It was one of them. Yeah.
Oh, Morbius is brilliant. His
Mm.
his 1970s vampire tale stuff is ahead of its time by like like at least like 20 years.
Yeah, no, I really have to
Um,
go back and read
and
that.
it's all black and white. But like instead of him like doing like there's some science aspect to it, but like it's him fighting occultists, and him actually like like graphically like like biting into people,
Yeah,
and really being horrified with his actions.
I really have
Which
to go back and read that. I think the closest thing I've really gotten to reading horror, I guess, is maybe From Hell. I mean, I've read like violent stuff like Preacher and I don't even know why the Last Man is considered, well, like Spawn and stuff like that, but that's not like straight horror. So I don't
yeah.
really think I've read too much other than the Man Thing, which I got from you. But other than that, yeah, I really got to delve deeper into this a little bit. But no, it's interesting also because I mean, I feel like independent films kind of brought back the genre for cinema. I mean, like I mentioned A24 and Blumhouse a lot on this podcast, and there's some other smaller companies, but it's interesting how that's also kind of a reflection of comics. How it was not like a mainstream kind of like, I mean, I don't even know if Miramax is a thing
No,
anymore, but Miramax or Marvel or, you know, whatever,
they're
major
probably owned by
company. Yeah.
Disney at this point, I'm sure.
Disney, that's what I meant. Yeah. So it's not like,
We're all owned by Disney at this
although
point.
Disney does own Alien, but whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
like, no, like I it's kind of on the, the independents, I think, to kind of fill the, the void of what people want but aren't getting,
Oh yeah, of course.
And,
Yeah.
and
No,
I
there's
think
a whole
that's what's
community
so great
for it.
about it, is that, like, there are people who, like, are discovering horror comics the first time, either be it, through vintage Marvel or, through the indies. And they're like, like, where can I get more of this? And, they, there's finally, I think, more of it as a, as a genre in comics, where, for much of my life, there was so much less of it, where if I wanted like a horror comic, I'd have to like dig for stuff from the 70s, and the 80s.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's also awesome for, someone like me who's a bit ignorant to the recent years of comic history to kind of, become aware that it's actually making a revival there too, because now it's like a whole other universe for me to delve into, which is awesome. So where do you see the genre going in the future? Because I know it's kind of dipped up and down in popularity. Do you think we're like on a total upswing now, or do you think
Upswing.
yeah, that's awesome.
I definitely think upswing. Just from going to, from shows and seeing what, other creators are working on. I mean, the Walking Dead is probably like, the comic of like, the 2010s, I guess.
Mhm.
And, that's such a horror comic, like, it's black and white. There's a real sense of danger every issue. Have you read the Walking Dead comic?
I have the first book, so not like the first
Okay.
mini book, like the first hardcover. So I read all that. I
Okay.
don't know how many issues it was, but yeah.
But like, that's a spectacular book, and what it does, other than, if you love grotesque horror, I mean, the art in that is phenomenal. But there's
I
a
guess
real
that's one I forgot that I
sense
read. Yeah.
there's a real sense that, like, well, because you think of it as a TV show a little bit, you kind of more almost associate a little bit more with like the show.
Yeah.
But the comic, I think, does it so much better than the show, where, the comic, anyone can go at any time. Like, there aren't actor contracts. Like, characters just, die unceremoniously like they would in a horror movie. And I think that's so neat to see,
Yeah.
in like an ongoing comic. But like, I think horror comics are definitely like an upswing, and like, not just zombies, but like, monsters, vampires, whatever you want to do, I feel like there's something out there for you. And I think that's such a great thing.
No, I feel the same way about books and movies now too, only because as you mentioned before, I mean, there's more of, you see visually, there's more of an audience for it. But I feel like we have like that many people at like horror cons before? Because at least from the videos that I've seen now compared to 10 years ago, I feel like that those stages have a much larger audience. Maybe that's just YouTube messing with me, but I feel like whenever I like look at cons online, those kind of horror things seem much more filled out.
No, but I think that speaks to the quality of the content that's out right now, because you have
Yeah.
such good horror content. You're getting so many more people interested in the genre, and that increases things like, ticket revenue, like, people buying horror movies, people going to horror cons.
Mm.
Like, the quality of the content, I almost feel like, on occasion, will dictate, the popularity of the genre, as it hopefully should.
So yeah, so you mentioned before about how horror kind of had a like it was popular at one point, then it wasn't as popular in comics. So where do you see the future of the genre in the comic medium now? Do you see it still on the uprise, or do you see
Oh,
it
on the
declining?
uprise for sure.
Hmm.
What, not
Okay,
like
cool.
1000%, especially what, what I see people doing, and like what I see people, publishing, not just, like my peers, but like, like other publishers,
Hmm.
like not just like my, people I know, like their creative work, but like, other people's creative work, what people are publishing. I think, horror comics are very strong. I don't see this genre going away anytime soon. I don't even, I don't think we've really hit, saturation per se. Like, I don't think like the market's necessarily like flooded with horror comics, but I think the stuff that out there like is great. I think there is a desire to see more of it. And I think that speaks to, which well, just, almost in the neglect of the genre for a little bit, but also to the, the quality of the work that's coming out. There's if you like horror, there's a horror story. There's a horror story for you, um, that you
Actually,
could
yeah,
dive
I
into
want
and
to stop right there
fantastically
for like
find.
two
Yeah,
seconds because
sure.
okay, so I mean, I was kind of I thought we were kind of on the same page with with film being a reflection of that. But now that I'm kind of thinking about it, for so many horror films and for so many horror novels, is there as much content for the comic community, or is it because there's been so many gaps within the acceptance, I guess, in the comic medium? Is it more? Is it still niche? And I know it's kind of growing, but is there as much material there for people to grab? Do you think?
I think so now. I think a few years ago, I don't know if I would have felt the same way.
Hmm.
But especially with the amount of books I think have been completed, like I know I mentioned like Harrow County, by Colin Bunn, put a Dark Horse, Lock and Key, Walking Dead, Witches. There's so many great books for horror fans to really kind of dig into and enjoy. That I whereas I think it was like more of a niche medium maybe a few years ago. I definitely think it's a lot more mainstream now.
That's
um,
awesome. That's really
no,
cool.
I think it's great. The one I'd like to see, I mentioned I'd like to see Marvel and DC explore that genre a little bit more.
Hmm.
They've got a lot of great characters that I think have kind of been on the shelf for a while. And you're seeing Marvel just started a new Morbius book that has been like pretty good. But like I still think it could be more horror based. Man Thing is a phenomenal character. Who if you're taking one thing away from this podcast, you're like what the hell is Man Thing? Um,
We have name
but
dropped that a
like
lot. Yeah.
yeah, no, but that was that's your first love of horror. You're never gonna forget your first love.
Oh no,
Uh,
I still haven't forgotten Evil Dead, which has introduced me to
yeah,
horror. And that's yeah.
who's
So
laughing now?
yeah, I saw all three of those movies in one day. Actually, it's a story for another time. But actually,
No, no, no.
I was going to ask you off camera about what your recommendations for me would be to get more into it. But I kind of now after hearing you, I mean, even though we have name dropped a lot of series, what
Yeah.
would you recommend to me? Because I feel like my audience could take
To you
some of that too.
personally?
To me,
Um,
well, either okay. I
yeah.
mean, I guess for the audience too, but I feel like if you were directing it towards me, it would be more of a I don't know a similar
Okay.
kind of vibe that
All right.
the dark audience has.
Okay. I'm gonna do two books here.
Okay,
Much more. I'm gonna do Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
really?
Which
Okay,
is yes, 100%.
I'll comment on that
And
in a second. But yeah,
so Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is a what if Sabrina was actually a real witch
mm,
with like, a covenant and writing her book and signing her soul over to like, the devil. And it's like, it's really grotesque. It's real creepy. But it's so neat in that it's also like a I'm going to say 60s. I always mess up those genres, but it's almost like a 1960s period piece as well.
mm,
So it kind of plays on that classic America, like, that classic Americana style while also being really kind of horrifying and being
interesting.
really personal.
So
And
I only asked because I saw the first season and I liked it. I heard it gets better as it goes on, so I don't want to like judge you harshly,
the
but it
comic
wasn't
is a
my thing
lot
as much.
darker. The
Okay,
comic
cool.
is massively darker.
Yeah, it was a bit more. I mean, they did have some nice horror shout outs in the show, but it was a bit too much teen drama mixed in for me personally.
I like the show a lot.
Yeah, I should stick with them more though. I
The
hear it gets
comic
different.
fleeces the show
Mm.
in so many ways, in my
Okay,
personal
cool.
opinion. So if you're looking for a more pure horror adventure, the comic is the way to go. Robert Hecht is the art, and he is phenomenal.
Oh,
It's when I was talking about how like I can't see Blackwoods being done by anyone other than Josh. I can't see Chilling Adventures of Sabrina being done by anyone other than Robert Hecht.
yeah. No, I guess I'm gonna make another Amazon purchase in a bit. And so, what's your second recommendation? I'm curious.
Um, Providence by Alan Moore,
Ah, yeah, yeah.
which is a which one? Alan Moore has a really kind of weird Lovecraft trilogy. Um, and Providence is the prequel, but it's pretty standalone until the end. But even then, you're getting a complete story and character arc.
Mm.
But essentially, Providence is about a New England journalist who wants to research. He had something tragic happen to him, and he wants to research the American occult as kind of like a way to kind of explore his own identity, which he hides, and he winds up running into all these H.P. Lovecraft characters.
It's
And
interesting.
he goes to like famous H.P. Lovecraft locations and stuff, but it's all slightly different, but for a reason that is really neat when you get to the end.
Man, I'm surprised I didn't read this before. I mean, I've read when I was younger, when I was really reading comics. I mean, I read obviously
It's
Watchmen,
fairly
From
recent
Hell.
of
Okay,
like the
cool.
last of like, I'm going to say, I think the book finished up, I want to say in 2016.
Oh, then yeah, that was way past when
Yeah,
I mean, I read
it's
more
fairly
of like
recent.
the 1990s throughout whenever our last year of college
Yeah.
was. Well, for me, it was 2013. But that's kind of when I fell off a bit. But no, I mean, I read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, V for Vendetta, so I was huge into Alan Moore, like like everyone else on the planet. But
Yeah.
no, I didn't know he was doing that. That's
No,
awesome.
this book has all of his strengths. Unfortunately, a lot of his tropes that I think he
Oh,
really
like
kind of
Killing Joke
overused.
kind of tropes, or
Yeah,
all
but like
right.
worse.
Okay. Well,
But like,
it's all right.
so
Preacher is one of my
I
favorite
do.
graphic novels of
Yeah,
all time, and I think Preacher is problematic in a lot of ways. So I feel like I could
yeah.
look past something. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like it's problematic in that, like, it's it's hard to recommend without a like a kind of warning. It does get kind of graphic
Mm.
sexually.
No, I
Um,
have films like that too that are some of my favorite movies of
yeah,
all time, but I can't really recommend them to too many people. So yeah.
yeah. So I do want to put that out there for everyone listening. It does there's some sexual violence in there.
Mm.
Um, but if it's something that you can, I don't what you want. If it's something that it won't bother you too much, I think it's a great read. And it's very interesting that every issue is bookended by the journalist keeping like a journal log of all the towns he's been to. And so you see the book as like the viewer, and then you kind of get to read his thoughts on what he went through
Mm.
and how on occasion they don't always match up, and it's really interesting.
I think I might actually want to. I'm thinking out loud, but I might actually want to have you on for an Alan Moore episode at some point because
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure,
there's
I'd be
too much
more
to
than
talk
happy
about
to come
now.
back.
But I was
Yeah,
just thinking back on Watchmen. I mean, how that is just strangely liberal, but then he has other aspects in other comics that are strangely so far right. I mean, he's all over the place. I can't even figure him
yeah,
out. But that's up for another episode. But no, I'm
another
very
time.
yeah, I'm very excited to read that. I'm probably going to order both of those as soon as we're done off of Amazon because we are in quarantine and I need more things to read. So thank you for those recommendations. But is there anything that you're working on right now other than Blackwoods that we could look forward to or thinking about
Oh,
working on?
1000%. So Sly and I, which I mentioned earlier, I do another comic, Tales of Happenstance. It's a double feature comic. One story is about it's like a crime story. It's about a Manhattan hitman who takes on a very unusual client.
Mm-hmm.
And the other story is it's called Another Night. It's more of a horror comedy. It's about a college student who becomes a werewolf after a one night stand. And his asshole roommate who keeps trying to take him out partying as he tries to adjust to this life change. Um, and they're both tremendously fun. Sly and I are actually currently working on the new issue. We just started production on that. So that should be hopefully coming out in the next few months.
I
I
know
have
Sly
another
too.
love Sly. Sly, I love
Yeah,
you.
he's great.
Um, and if you're interested in Sly has his own work. He has a whatchamacallit. He has SlyStories.com where he has a few of his own comics that he's published. He has a really neat Dungeons and Dragons YouTube channel called Damn It All. So if you also enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, go see that. But our new issue for Tales should hopefully be coming out in the next few months. But I started work on another project. We'll see if it comes to fruition at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more of like a sci-fi survival horror book.
Oh, that's awesome. And
So
I do
we'll
believe you mentioned this earlier on in the episode, but just to remind everyone, where can they find your comics for purchase?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So Tales of Happenstance is online. You can find it on my website at amazingjciano.com. If you'd like to purchase Blackwoods, we do all the local conventions and shows for the most part for the Long Island, New York scene. But since I'm not sure when the next Comic Con is going to be, if you're interested in purchasing Blackwoods, I believe Josh has all 3 issues on his Big Cartel website. Which have in addition to those comics, I think he's got some original artwork up there. Josh takes commissions, so if you read the comic and you like his work and you want an original art piece by Josh, I think he's open for commissions right now too. But if you're interested in Blackwoods, I've got a 4-page demo up on my website. And if you want to buy the books themselves, feel free to purchase them off Josh's website. Or if you wanted to direct message me, I'm sure we can work something out. via, my social media. You can find me at Instagram and Twitter at AmazingJCiano.
Awesome. So those are pretty much all the questions I had for you. But before we close out, is there anything that you think is crucial that I missed, either on your experience as a writer or your works or horror in general that you wanted to add, or do you think we basically covered all the bases?
Yeah, I think we covered all the bases, but for anyone who's interested in writing horror, write what scares you. Explore your weird.
Yeah.
Was one of the best writing advices that I've ever kind of received, was, kind of explore your weird. I love horror because horror, I do a lot of comedy. I do a lot of more lighthearted writing. But horror just provided a genre and, a way to have a different voice that I couldn't have in any of my other work. And it's kind of opened a lot of doors for me creatively that have been really rewarding to go down. So, create the work that you want to see in the world. I wanted more horror comics, so, we went and we made our own horror comic. And the feedback we've gotten from people has been astronomical, and, it means the world to me that, people, you go to Comic-Con and, you could buy any comic in the entire world basically at these things.
Yeah.
So for people to, check out my work, just really kind of means the world to me. So if you ever, if you're watching this, you ever, purchased, anything from me, or, read my stuff, just, personally, thank you. I guess that's the final note I'm going to have on that.
Yeah, and I can't recommend his work highly enough again. And dude, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I know we're friends and everything, but you have been one of my most fascinating guests. Just it's so awesome to hear from someone who actually writes, and especially in a medium that I'm, I grew up with, but I'm not as familiar with anymore. You've been awesome, dude. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, please, no, thank you for having me. Everyone out there, stay safe.
Yeah, for real, guys, stay safe.
Live your own trapped in a mansion horror. Do what you gotta do right now. I don't care how many times you have to write, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Stay safe.
All right. Well, with that, thank you guys again for tuning in to
Read the Man Thing.
Read the Man Thing to feed the dark podcast. I'll get
Vampire
this out if it kills me.
Morbius.
You can
feed
find me at you can find me on YouTube, Libsyn, Apple Music, and Spotify when this comes out, but not yet. Thank you again. Peace, guys.